All right, let's talk El Tri. Mexico's Copa America roster is out. The 26-player list under Jimmy Lozano. I think the first thing we have to mention, again, the big names that aren't there, no Memo Ochoa, no Henry Martin, no Chucky Lozano, no Raul Jimenez, no Luis Angel Malagon. He was supposed to be Memo's replacement in goal. He's out injured, so there you see the 3 goalies that have been called in for Mexico. It's a 26-player list with an average age of just over 25 years old. Herc, it's time for 3 questions. We've been told this is a roster refresh for Mexico. What do you think of the actual refresh now that we've seen it? Enough or not enough?
Refresh? Come on, man.
What refresh?
Nobody's buying that. This isn't a generational shift. This is a let's get some of those vacas sagradas, some of those sacred cows out of this locker room. Let's get some of those players who maybe haven't worked out for you but are too big of a name, just leave out with some sort of excuse off of this roster. What was the average age here? 25.64? Do you know what the average age? This is Copa America, 25.64. Do you know what the average age was at the Gold Cup that they won with Santi Jimenez scoring that game winner against Panama? 25.
Just about the same, probably?
25.5. It was younger. And that team had a 39-year-old Memo Ochoa. And they were younger, Seb. How is this a refresher? How are you seeing new faces here? All you're pretty much saying is, Chucky, my guy, you're out right now. I wasn't too happy with the comments you made after the U.S. men's national team game that we lost to you. I wasn't happy with those. How you questioned me tactically. You're out. Memo Ochoa, you're probably not going to be the guy in 2026. And we probably got to get you out and moved out. We got to give this goalkeeper, Luis Malagon, a time to have the team be his. You're out. And now guess what? Malagon isn't there. And then the other one is Henry Martin. I know that I used you in the Olympics. I know you were my guy. I know you were also my starter in Gold Cup, in Copa Oro, which technically you being a starter won us Copa Oro, the Gold Cup. But it's Santi's time right now. Those are the only 3 names, unless you want to count Gallardo, Jesus Gallardo, who's on his way out anyways, because he's not even the left back. He wasn't the starting left back for Monterrey. It was Arteaga. So those are the only guys who are out, but most of those guys would have been out anyways. It's more about the federation saying, let's get these guys out of the way and paint this generational change, when in reality it's not. You take out Henry Martin, and in comes Memo Martinez, and he's just as old. He's 29 years old, turning 30. Henry Martin's 32. You're not giving a young guy a chance. So this is really no different than what you had before. They're just trying to hide it better.
I got my thoughts on the roster refresh, as they're calling it. I want to ask you a question, though, about potential snubs just in the list of 26. Is there anybody that you say should have been in this team? I know a lot of people are asking about Jordi Cortizo. Could he have helped a little bit? I don't think that's a player that's going to make a big difference. Is there anybody in this pool that you think should be there that isn't?
To make a difference today? No. But that's,
so no snubs.
Well, hold on. To make a difference today? No. But that's not what generational changes focus on, making a difference today. It's making a difference tomorrow. Why can't a guy who's highly touted, who's been so sought after in Liga MX circle like Jordan Carrillo, why can't he stay on here? Why can't he be a guy to get better for the future? Why say you're gone? I don't understand some of these moves. Like, if he's going to be the 26th man on the roster, you're probably not going to dip there. So bring in a kid who's 18 years old, who you can say maybe can give you something for the future, instead of going with the player who you're probably not going to use anyway, who's, 28, 29, 30?
So people will see that roster list, Herc, and they'll see a lot of familiar names. If we go through some of the names that are relatively new, what we realize here is it's not guys who are going to make a difference, right? In defense of the relatively new players, you got Brian Garcia, Brian Gonzalez. In midfield, Nene Beltran is really maybe the one guy who has obviously played with the national team, but not a whole lot. You could say he's new. Flores and Huerta up top, they've been around a little while. I guess if you want to say they're new, you could count them. And Memote. First of all, none of those guys are difference makers. None of those guys are starters. And most of them, to your point, Herc, aren't even young. Memote's 29. Garcia's 26. Nene Beltran is 26. So the refreshment, the guys that you're bringing in aren't necessarily worthy of it. And to your very first point, the guys that you got rid of, right, are absolutely worthy of being included in this 26. If somebody said, you got to give me a list of the best 26 Mexican players available today, there's no way, Herc, that you could tell me that Memo Ochoa wouldn't be one of the top 3 goalies. There's no way you could tell me Henry Martin wouldn't be one of the top. But that's the reality right now. This is the reality.
Yeah.
Henry Martin wouldn't be in this 26-player list. Chucky Lozano, as bad as you want to say that he was at PSV, wouldn't be good enough to make this 26-player list. This roster refresh, this generational shift, Herc, at the end of the day, it was forced. It wasn't timed well, and it was forced. And Mexico's going to pay for that in the Copa America. This roster does not give me any confidence ahead of Copa America.
Forget the confidence, Seb. It does you no good in the future. What are you trying to prepare a 29-year-old forward for who's not going to see the field? Like, you don't. There's the projections of him being there over Henry Martin, being at the World Cup, or Henry Martin are very slim. You know, maybe even over Raúl Jiménez, very slim. So why is he here? Like, what's the point? What are you doing here? It doesn't make sense. This is 2 to 3 years too late.
It's symbolic. It feels like they're almost, throwing meat to the press, the lions in the press. Symbolically, we're going to try to get younger, although to your point, maybe they didn't even get younger. But obviously, it doesn't seem like it's a roster refresh that's going to make much of a difference. One of the places they have had to refresh, partially through injury, partially through choice, is, of course, in goal. Herc, we've got 3 relatively at the international level, inexperienced options here in Rangel, Gonzalez, and Acevedo. Who do you think should be the starter in Copa America?
Oh, good Lord. This is also, it's going to be Julio Gonzalez, but let me tell you why it's not Raúl Rangel, why it's not Tala Rangel. He's 24 years old. He's had less than 30 first-team games with Chivas. He just got his debut versus Uruguay, and he was shellacked. His confidence is very low. It's not the guy you want in the net right now. It's also not going to be Carlos Acevedo, who, think about how crazy this is for Carlos Acevedo. At one time, he was the guy many projected as the future number 1 in the Mexican national team. A year ago, Leverkusen. There were reports maybe 18 months ago of him going to Leverkusen in the Bundesliga, and then injuries arose, and by the time he comes back to the field, he's a shadow of his former self, and he's one of the most scored-on goalkeepers in Liga MX for the last 6 months. It's Julio Gonzalez, because even though he only has 2 games with the Mexican national team, he had a decent 2 seasons with Pumas, where he at least has confidence. Out of the 3, he's the guy that at least has confidence. He's the older player. He's 32. I understand. He's only got 2 caps. Acevedo has 6. But he's the older player, the more informed player right now, and has confidence. At the club level, who knows what the national team level is going to be like? But given the situation, given that even though Luis Malagón was injured and you didn't go back to Memo Ochoa, he's the guy. It's a confidence issue for me right now. I don't see Acevedo as being the confident player, and I surely don't see Tala Rangel being the confident player after he was shellacked 4-0 against Uruguay. I will go with Julio Gonzalez.
All right, you're going Gonzalez. I'm going Acevedo. Now, I'm going Acevedo for the first point that you made about him, which is that for years and years, we've been talking about him as a potential option to eventually replace Memo Ochoa in goal. Now, that conversation was much different 2-3 years ago, Herc, than it is today. Fully understanding he's had a rough go of it of late at Santos. But let's talk about who Carlos Acevedo is. This is a guy with quality. This is a guy with character. This is a guy who's played for the Mexican national team. I know it's only 6 times, but at least somewhat before the last year. And he's a guy who's a winner, Herc. A guy who has won a title in Liga MX. Surely that's some type of confidence that says this guy has the quality to start in goal for Mexico. I look at Julio Gonzalez. And Herc, I gotta say, I feel like we're being prisoners of the moment here. This he's 33 now. His whole career, he was a backup. And not a backup at the national team level, not a backup in Liga MX, like a backup in Liga MX Expansión in the second division. This is a guy who spent the first 15 years of his career not playing. He's been a starter at the Liga MX level for 3 seasons, a year and a half.
Yeah. Do you want me to tell you why? Because he was the eternal backup to Osvaldo Sanchez at Santos, and then he was the backup at Pumas to Tala Alavera. He's been backup to some very, very good goalkeepers. Oh, Marchesín at Santos as well. Very good goalkeepers. He's got a wealth of experience. I will push back on your Acevedo shout only because we've not seen the best of Acevedo post-injury. And he's a player that twice in pregame, in a Mexico national team uniform when he's about to start has gotten injured and could not start. He's not proven to be healthy, Seb. And he's not proven to be good between the posts this season. That's the only reason I would push back, because quite honestly, I kind of feel like we're splitting hairs between these three.
Yes,
and that's unfortunately.
Yes,
that's unfortunate.
But why I'm going with Acevedo is this is a major international tournament. And I feel like over the course of his career, he's been in more big games than any of the other two. And at this point, Herc, with what you're left to choose from, I think that experience is a potential differentiator here. But what I would say of all the issues with this Mexican national team coming into this tournament, of all the potential weaknesses, I think this, at this point, having eliminated Memo by choice and lost Malagon, who I was actually starting to get confident about, having seen how he played for Club America, this is the biggest issue of all right now for Mexico. This might be the biggest weakness they have going into the tournament.
I mean, it's certainly the biggest question mark, right? Because it's the most unproven position that you're going to have out there. All the rest of the lines, they have international experience. They've had good moments, some bad moments, but they've had moments. So to your point, this is definitely the biggest question mark.
All right, let's get away from the question marks. Let's get away from the weaknesses. Let's get away from the negativity. What if Mexico has a good tournament? How might that come about, Herc? What is the strength of this El Tri roster as we break it down?
Well, listen, I've heard you many times sit here and ask for Mexico to be pragmatic because they don't defend well, right? So if you don't defend well, what do you need to do to win a game? You need to score goals. And if there's one person on this team that's proven at the club level to score goals, and lots of them, it's Santiago Giménez. If there's one person that they want to get going at the international level, it's Santiago Giménez. He needs to be that player, Seb. This is the biggest test he has in his life. It is not Feyenoord. It is not the Eredivisie. It's not even the Champions League. Trust me, right now, it's the Mexican national team because pundits, the fan base, they're losing hope when it comes to Santi Giménez. If Mexico is to make a run in what I think is a very tricky group, it's not going to come by being pragmatic. If they win games, it's going to come through goals, the way they know how to play, and it's going to come through Santi Giménez. He needs to be that 9. He needs to be that leader in that final third. That's got to be the strength in this roster, because I look at this roster, where are the strengths? I can't find too many, but what has to be the strength? It has to be Santi Giménez.
Yeah, if you think about who the best players are on paper, not how they've performed for the national team, but who the best players are on paper based on where they play, what their reported transfer value might be, it's Santiago Giménez and then Edson Alvarez. So at least you've got two guys who at the spine of your team should be pretty well prepared for this tournament, you hope. If I look beyond that, everything that I can point to, Herc, as a strength is hopeful, right? I can look into the midfield and say, all right, I know Edson's there, and I know if he plays like he plays for West Ham, both in terms of quality and actually how he plays and doesn't try to be something he's not, I can feel good about that position and that player. Luis Chavez, operating in that midfield, I can feel very good about based on some of his performances with the Mexican national team. If the third guy in that midfield can be the missing piece, whether it's an Orbelin or a Piojo Alvarado, whoever else you might drop in there, Chiquito Sanchez, who we're seeing on the screen right now, and can actually make that midfield go, that's been the historical strength of Mexico for a long time. And Herc, there are a lot of options there, and there are also some new guys up top, right? Relatively new at Quiñones, slightly more new to the national team in terms of experience at Chino Huerta. If those guys pop off, you might be able to have a good tournament. But all of this is hopeful. The truth about saying there's a strength on this Mexico roster, it's a difficult exercise because any strength, Herc, you can pretty easily poke holes in that argument when you look at this Mexican team.
It's the weakest pool of Mexican players that I've certainly seen in my lifetime. And from playing in Liga MX, some of the guys I used to play with, they would have to win goal-scoring titles. They would have to win championships. They would have to be consistent players, win, the Balón de Oros that they give you for being the best player in your position in the season. Multiple of those awards to get called up to the Mexican national team. Now you don't even need to be a starter. You need to just show some flash of brilliance or of hope. Give somebody enough to call you up. It's very easy to get called up to the Mexican national team nowadays.
Jamaica, Venezuela, and Ecuador. That's what awaits Mexico in their group in the upcoming Copa America. Let's take a look at the odds for how Mexico will do in the tournament, according to ESPN. All right, so plus money there to win Group B, plus 150 to reach the semifinal. Feels like that should be a little bit higher payout. Plus 450 to reach the final. plus 1,200 for Mexico to win the Copa America. They open on June 22nd against Jamaica.